Hi, I'm Sam with jbugs.com. We're wrapping up the wiring here on a 1971 Super Beetle. I made it out of the trunk, but I'm going to be back there in a second. But first, we'll enjoy our roomier interior for a moment while we hook up our brake warning light. We have the 3 wires for the brake light switch sticking through the dashboard, and since we rerouted our harness, our red wire is a little longer than normal. We cut it to match the other wires, strip the end off and crimp on a new 110 connector. Then the wires are plugged into the switch. The brown wire plugs into the 31 terminal, the red wire plugs into the K terminal, and the black wire plugs into the 15 terminal. Then the switch can be pressed and placed into the dash. So we can continue stretching our legs for a bit, we'll get underneath the car and plug in the reverse light wiring we mentioned in the first video of this series. The reverse light switch is at the front, right side of the transmission, on top of the nose cone. So it's really not easy to get to or show on camera. The 2 wires from the harness plug into the terminals on the switch, and it doesn't matter which side they go onto. Now we'll head back into the trunk, where we'll plug in the headlight relay at the top left, and the flash relay in the middle position. We'd just about be done with the stock wiring, for now, if we had a stock speedometer anyway. We're going to wire up our fresh air fan and its switch. Replacement wiring harnesses don't include any wiring for the fresh air system since they're rarely used. So we're going to make our own. We start by first setting the fresh air box and fan roughly in place so we can see where we need to end our wiring harness. With the ground wire plugged in, we see that the wiring for our fan ends in the same area. We'll use some lengths of leftover black-white, black-green, and black wiring that wasn't used on an older installation to make a new harness. This is close enough to the original wiring, which is the same, other than the black-white wire, which would have been black-yellow. We strip off the ends of all 3 wires and crimp on 110 connectors so the wires can be plugged into the fan switch. The black-white wire plugs into the 33B terminal, the black-green wire connects to the 33F, and the black wire plugs into the 30 terminal. We install the switch into the dash, then reroute the black wire along the back of the dash to the front of the fuse box to the 3rd fuse from the right. We cut the wire to length, and then pull the wire back out. We install a short wire sheath on all 3 wires, and then reroute the black wire back to the fuse box, crimp on a terminal end, and plug it into a terminal at the 3rd fuse from the right side. We set the fresh air box in again to check the length of the black-white and black-green wires. They are cut to length. We crimp on terminal ends, and then install shrouded connectors. When the time comes, we can hook up the fresh air fan. Now we can get to hooking up all of our gauges. That starts by expanding our daisy-chained white-red wire for all the dash lights. We pull the wires off the speedometer and move the first terminal to our fuel gauge. And then we work down and across the dash, cutting additional wires to length and crimping on connectors, jumping from one gauge light to the next. We had leftover white-red wiring to make the daisy chain, which is easy enough to duplicate otherwise with white wire and a red permanent marker. Once we finish the dash light daisy chain, we work on a ground assembly. All of the dash lights need a ground connection, and all of the gauges need a ground too. There will be at least 2 ground wires at every gauge. We start by adding a jumper terminal to the light on our fuel gauge, and move the chassis ground wire to it after shortening it. This will clean up the wiring and open up a ground tab on the chassis. Now, we start making a daisy-chained wire that will go from the grounds on the fuel gauge and its lights, to the oil temp gauge and light, to the chassis ground, up to the speedometer, and across to the other gauges and all of their dash lights. Next, we'll expand the dash power harness that we previously ran to our tachometer and the oil pressure gauge. So we cut off the last end and crimp on another connector and wire and continue the chain to the speedometer, the oil temp gauge, and the fuel gauge. Our voltmeter is getting power from the ignition switch, so we don't need to power it. However, we do need to hook up a sending unit for our speedometer. We'll use an AMPI cable-driven Hall effect sensor to send a signal to our VDO speedometer. We set the sensor and the cable onto the side rail of the fuel tank ledge and route the wiring harness through the speedometer cable hole up towards the gauge. The cable will route down to the wheel just like originally. The wiring harness, once it's routed up to the speedometer, is wired up with the white wire connecting to the number 6 and the number 8 terminals. The red wire connects to the number 2 terminal, and the black wire connects to the chassis ground or the number 3 terminal on the speedometer. The speedometer is powered at the number 4 terminal, and with that, we've wired up virtually everything in the car, as it sits now anyway. We still need to install a radio, and of course, as the car is assembled further, the wiring for other items will be hooked up as we go. We'll cover the installation of those in the future. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this series, even though we didn't wire our car as VW did. We wanted to show you can modify a stock wiring harness as needed for whatever accessories you may have added to your car. Either way, you can get most of the wiring and other parts we've installed, along with thousands of other parts for your vintage Volkswagen at jbugs.com. Again, thanks for watching. Make sure to click the like button and the subscribe button. And whenever you need parts for your vintage Volkswagen, head over to jbugs.com.